Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to the VET S.O.S podcast. Here, today, sitting on the stoop, we're about to get the scoop with Dr. John A. King. So you got Dr. King and King Scott here today, and this is going to be a phenomenal conversation. So we're diving into the intersection of performance and pain, purpose and recovery. Some of y'all know the story, but Dr. King is going to share what he's doing with his organization. Because here's the truth. High performance doesn't mean you're not carrying something. And I guess, y'all see him right there. He's a leader. He's a speaker. And he's the founder of the Phoenix Collective, a movement focused on helping individuals rise from trauma and step into purpose-driven performance. Through his work, he challenges the idea that trauma isn't something to hide, and instead it reframes it as something that can be transformed. This conversation is going to be about leadership, transition, mental health, faith, and what it truly means to rise again and again. Because just like the Phoenix, we don't just survive, we rise. Now let's get into it. Dr. King, welcome to the scoop. How you doing today?
Hey, doing good, brother, man. Doing good.
Oh man, look. So I've been waiting for this conversation for a while because I was looking at the website. I was like, wow, the Phoenix Collective. I shared with you. I have a little Phoenix Solution Enterprise, and then I shared with you my journey coming through the military and the all the struggles and battles I had with mental health and trying to re-identify myself. And I even got up to a size of double and a half of what I was in the service. But I'm down now. Like I'm down because I've told myself, like, what can I do to show others that you don't have to stay in the ashes? You can rise.
It's good, man. It's really good.
It, it's a choice. It's
Yeah,
a
it is.
choice I made. It's a choice that I even reached out to you on social media, LinkedIn, like, hey, do you mind coming to the? You like, sure, send me some contact information now. Cause I seen your website. I was like, man, this is gonna be a game changer, right? Like I know that I've been battling with some internal stuff daily
Yeah.
and seeing what you're doing with the Phoenix Collective. But I know a little bit about that. But before we start, what's the scoop on the John King? Like what's this? We're sitting here on the stool. It stems from just getting the information and sharing it, right? This is just having a great conversation, talk about rising from the ashes. But what's the scoop on you, Dr. King?
Well, man, there's a couple. Great question. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to being here. So there's a couple aspects to my life. The one that most people know about is that I was abused from the age of 4 for about 12 years, and what we would call traffic today. Trained to be very good at sex, movies, made a whole range of different things. What people don't know is I'm actually an Indigenous Australian. And I just reconnected with my family 2 years ago. In Australia, there was a policy to breed the blackout. And in Mbrani or Indigenous people, melanin is a recessive gene. In Africans, it's a dominant gene. So for my entire life, I've been too black for Australia. And here I'm in America for 20 years. I'm too white for America. So I've lived in this gray world, and I reconnected with my family. Um, And, it was one of the most healing things I've ever done in my life, is to understand, to see people who look like me, who act like me, who walk like me, who talk like me. Um, to understand that I've gone from orphan to tribe. I'm actually a gulungal, or a tribal leader within my people, responsible for the songs and laws of our people and our culture. And to go from orphan to tribe, for having no place to belong to having a place to belong, has been probably the most healing part of my journey. And I don't discount everything I've had up to this and everything I had to go with my childhood trauma. But in terms of rounding it out the other end of my life and understanding that, understanding a sense of place, a sense of country, a sense of community has been very impactful and has given me insights into so many other things that I've dealt with over my life.
Wow. So I definitely want to dive into what you're doing now with the Phoenix Collectives. And one of my first, like, I wrote down some questions because I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna have a doctor in the house, so I gotta make sure I'm prepared because I've seen your work and it's phenomenal. My first thing I wanted to ask you was, what does performance mindset truly mean to you?
I think I think most people when they hear the word performance, they're
Mhm.
talking about the externals. Mindset is internal. So often in our life, we live from the outside in. In our as we grow up, we're told what to do, where to go, how to dress, how to act, what to believe. And in your case, you go into the military and it's the same. Police, it's the same. You come out, you get married, you're supposed to go to university, you're supposed to go to college, you're supposed to get a mortgage.
Right.
All of these are external things that come in. For me, true performance is living from the inside out. Our purpose, our mission, our vision, and our values. What are those things that are fundamentally important to us? And how do we find our way in the world? And for people like yourself and many members in your audience who have had traumatic occurrences or have been in places like the military and you're in a position of transition where all your life you really have been told from the outside in what to do, you come to this intersection of coming back into society or community, into family, and you've got nothing. There's no structure or context for that. And you're having to
Right.
actually rediscover who you really are. And for me, that's true performance. It's not about numbers, it's not about sales metrics. It's about living according
Mhm.
to what you hold as true.
Wow. And man, this could be a good session. This look, the doctor's in session. Like this is gonna be a great session because high performers can still be struggling internally. And I was once one of those, right? That kid, I used to be everywhere. Like I was doing all the tasks. I was, running all these marathons. I was doing a lot of things, but I was struggling on the inside. I shared it with you.
Yeah.
I was struggling on the inside, but I kept the external. I know a lot of people keep that external because I could talk on my behalf is I did not want people to see my weakness.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the key way, Kingsley's that it manifests is that
Mm,
we misplace recovery for busyness. And we try and we spend a lot of time in activity instead of doing the internal work. So internal work can only happen in silence. Internal work, most of it happens in solitude. And if we keep ourselves busy, engaged in a lot of activities, a lot of crap, and guys like us, we hit to the gym, we hit the club, we do whatever it is we want to do. We with our friends, we're always at a barbecue. There's always got something we've got to do.
y-
We're on our phones, we're scrolling, we're doom scrolling. We're constantly throwing that white noise at our soul. And you can't hear God in white noise. You've got to get aside. And this is one of the wonderful lessons I learned from my people. Because when you're in the outback of Australia, there's nothing. You sit around a fire and you sit with the ground. And, we've got 250 years of colonization that's happened. And our people have been traumatized for 7 or 8 generations. And so it's multiple layers of trauma and you can't deal with that in noise. You've got to be
right.
comfortable with yourself to learn to love yourself and live with yourself. And it doesn't matter where your background's from or where you're from. Anybody who's had to deal with these very intense things that many of us have, you've got to do that in silence. You've got to be learned to be comfortable with yourself.
Wow. And it took a while for me to be comfortable with myself to
Yeah,
identify
it always
what I
does.
need to work on. And is that part of I guess, the sustainable performance? It's like I was in the mindset, Dr. King, like, well, if I overperform, nobody will ask me how I'm doing, right? Because they see I'm people are winning awards. You're doing this, you're doing that. You're the go-to person. Hey, when you need something, give this person a call and rarely say no.
Yeah.
That sustainable performance, like kind of for me, I was like on autopilot. And I know a lot of other individuals, they stay on autopilot. And it's like I didn't want to deal with the internal. So I just always wanted to get from point A to point B and just hit autopilot and just at the end of the day, I don't even know what happened. Like, man, what happened today? I just
Yeah.
told myself, make it to tomorrow. Just make it to
Yeah.
tomorrow. So what separates performance from burnout, you think?
Self-awareness. You have to be
Mm,
prepared to be reflective. And so for a lot of us, we're tough guys, we've put our life on the line in different areas, we've been vulnerable, we get out there, and our self-awareness is not something that we are comfortable with because we're asking ourselves questions that we may not want to resolve. Like if you sit with yourself and you start to see that there's things that had to change. You mentioned your weight situation and your mental health situation. You're aware that those have to change, but in order to change them, you have to spend time with them and you have to be honest. What we're not good with is being graceful with ourselves. We can be very critical as men of ourselves, but we're very rarely graceful with ourselves. As men, we tend to be very graceful with all those around us and those in our lives and very hard on ourselves. It's the nature of manhood. We expect a lot because we know we're supposed to give a lot. We're corrector, protectors, and directors, prophet, priests, and kings. That's who we are. So I think with part of it is we are not graceful with ourselves. And if we are graceful with ourselves, that we'll understand that we are doing the best we can with what we know, and that tomorrow is another opportunity for us to grow, and it's another opportunity for us to develop. And that we're only doing, as I said, what we can with what we know, and tomorrow we're going to learn something more. And if we give ourselves that opportunity to gracefully fall forward, then we've got an opportunity always to grow into our best self. It's when a man starts being really, really hard on themselves that we actually stop growing. We stop giving ourselves grace, and that's when we get into the cycles of suicide, depression, overeating, a whole lot of those really negative behaviors.
that's when that trauma. I'm thinking of it as like trauma and then recovery, right? Like you go through a trauma and then the recovery is after. In order, and I'm just like going through what I can remember when I was going through that trauma and I got to the recovery aspect, I was still in that trauma because I didn't address it.
Yes. And I think that's a great point, Kinsley. It's like often people say that time heals trauma. I strongly disagree with that. What time does is give you distance between trauma, and what you are is you're
Mm,
hoping the trauma will disappear. But unfortunately, it often comes out as anger, numbness, addiction, shame, very promiscuous relationships, insomnia, secrecy, pornography. All of those things are things that we put in the place of actually doing the work. And so I've come to believe in my own journey that time does not bring healing. What it does is actually compound a problem. And, we have to spend time actually sitting with and processing the things that we go through.
wow. How do you think that impacts long term?
I think it's truth telling. I think it's being able to be honest with yourself and honest with people
Mm,
around you. Um,
wow.
Not a cleaned up version, not a politically correct version,
Mm,
not a socially acceptable version. But what have you buried in the dark and how can you drag it out? And I think that's really what recovery is saying out loud the quiet bits. Now you don't necessarily have to broadcast it to everybody, but you
right.
really do have to have some people in your lives, a spouse, a partner, a mate, a gym buddy, that you can actually talk about the quiet bits out loud with.
Dr. K, you know what I did? When I had to realize that my spiral was keep on spiraling, I went to a mirror and I looked at my external, right? Because we talk about two things, the external and the internal. So my internal self had to look at the external self in the mirror. And I asked myself, I said, man, what are we gonna do about it? Because I was avoiding to address it.
Yeah.
Why do so many people avoid addressing the trauma? And like I said, like this is a healing moment for me. And I know when others come across this podcast, listening to it or watching it, I'm sure they're gonna pull something from me because is a lot of is what they say 8 billion people in this world. I know it's a lot. There's a lot of people in this world, and I can't be the only one that's that's going through this. You know, I went through it silently for a long, long time
Mm.
until I had to look into the mirror and talk to my external self.
I think, men would rather be seen hard than hurt, and I think that
Mm,
silence feels safer than honesty, and I think that a lot of us are because of the expectations we put on ourselves and, a lot of it's on ourselves. Society doesn't put those expectations, we do,
yeah,
is that we feel that if we speak, we're gonna lose control, and
yeah,
when you're in the midst of a trauma space, control is the most important. Now, you'll know this because you'll walk into a cafe and you'll always have to have your back to the wall. You can't go to
yes,
sleep
uh,
and you go unless your firearm is close to you. Not only that, you can't go to the
yes,
shitter sometimes unless your firearm's close to you. And you go to the movies and they say no firearm, and you're either gonna take one in there or you're gonna go to your car. You're just not gonna go in there. So
yeah,
we have these series of we go to the same gym. Well, why do we go to the same gym?
mm,
Because we know the same people and we know where the exits are. We go to the
yes,
same restaurants. We go to the same places. We go to the same
yes,
church. I don't want to go to a new church. Why? I don't even like this church, but I know this
yeah,
church. And I know if a
yes,
stranger works in this church. And so I
yes.
think there's those series of things that it's very much important for us to have control because we feel out of control. We know on the inside that we're out of control. And instead of taking the time to address those things that keep us running, we'd rather bury it because I'd rather be hard than hurt, and I'd rather be silenced and actually genuinely be safe.
Everything you said, I'm checking off my
Your own
internal
box.
checklist. I'm like, yeah, I do that. I do that. I do that. I do that. I even circle the block a couple of times, make sure there's
Of
no
course. If
headlights following. Or
if some bastard follows me home, if for more than 3 blocks he's behind me, I'll go around and I'll follow him. And
yeah,
then I'll come back. I've gone to leave to go out to an appointment and I've seen a car pull into my neighborhood I've never seen. I'm going back, man. I'm making sure my door's locked, my wife. I'll call her and say, you get the gun out and you put it there because there's a
yeah,
strange car. Well, it's probably someone going to school with their kids. It could be, or it could be a terrorist. I don't know, but I'm
right,
making sure that we're sorted.
right. So you come in and decide like I'm gonna build out this Phoenix Collective. I'm gonna build out this trauma. The way how I see it is it's a trauma recovery for men, right? That's
Yeah.
the way how I take it when I look at the website and when I reach out to you and see your work is trauma recovery.
Yeah.
So what inspired you the creation for the Phoenix Collective? Because it's different. You have I seen on the website. So if y'all don't know understand what the website, Doctor John, can you share the website information so they could go and pull it up while we talk about it because it's laid out nicely. I love the way how it's laid out. Um, what inspired you to create the Phoenix Collective?
Um, well, and I'm just making sure I wanna give you something. I wanna give you for your audience. If they go to, if they put the word podcast in, they're gonna get a major break on something. So we run a program. And this is why I ran the program. It's phoenixcollective.app. So for me, my recovery process took about 15 years and $300,000. And, recovery is an ongoing thing. It's not a place you ever arrive at. It's something that you'll always manage. And so
Right,
when I was going through this, I had no support because there was no support for anyone who was particularly male. And you'll know this in law enforcement. There's a lot of resources for women and girls, as there's nothing really for boys and men. and especially boys and men who have been abused by women, because we don't even have those conversations. And you'll know this, and you'll know on
Right.
the ground in law enforcement that at least half the abuse victims you see are young boys or male, and those stats aren't talked about. So I wanted to build something for not only men, for women and for women as well, and for the women that love those men. And my wife and I did it together. So we've journeyed, over this 15 years. It's cost us about 300,000. I've been blessed enough to be in a position where I could work from home and fund my own recovery. And I wanted to give people what I didn't have, and that was a starting point. And I'm hoping that by taking all this knowledge and information and giving it to them in such a fashion that they can get ahead faster than I could. That they'll have the information of everything that I learned and Melissa learned, and we wanna make that available to them so that they can do it, and they don't have to spend the 15 years. Maybe they'll only spend 10. Maybe they'll get it down to 8, but they'll able to be moved into a position of feeling like they have some control over their life. They have some handles around their trauma. I had the
Right.
opportunity of standing on the shoulders of giants when I did it. I read everything from Napoleon through to the Civil War, to the work that was done in the Second World War and coming out of, the Gulf War and the military stuff. I stood on all the shoulders of those giants and read everything. I read 200 books, and I learnt that stuff. So what I've done is try and take that information and make it available for people so they don't have to start where I had to start.
Wow. And coming out of I know why I chose a Phoenix for my journey. You have the Phoenix Collective. What made you use that as the launch point for what you're doing in
Well,
this world?
I think for people like us, we're ashborn. We've risen from the ashes. And I
Yeah.
wanted to have a space where, people like us would understand that they're not alone. So we do a couple of things. Every second Saturday, we do man church, and we get together online. We have it just for the guys on a Zoom call, and the ladies can watch on Instagram and TikTok. I do that because then the guys don't have to go home and tell their wives what they did online. The ladies can all watch, and we turn it
Right.
off about half. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
we turn it off halfway through, and then we just sit around and we have questions as men about the teaching. And,
Mm,
it's very impactful, and it's the same on our collective calls. We've got a call coming up, tonight, actually, and it's all free, and about every 6 weeks we do these because we wanna help as many people as we can and get them resources. And I think for any of us who've been through anything, it's an opportunity to know that you're not alone. And that's one of the recovery is really lonely if you don't have people. I was blessed to have Melissa and a couple of really good friends that were there all the way through my recovery. For as long as I've been going through it, I've had people walk with me, and I'm blessed, and I know that's sometimes unfortunately unique. So I wanted to build the collective so that people don't have to do this alone.
mm. Wow. What transformation have you witnessed? And the reason why I just asked, because when you're saying that you said people around you to get you through coming out of the ashes. Dr. John, I had to tell myself, I don't know if this was the right thing, but this was something that I had to tell myself, like, nobody's coming to save you, Kings. Nobody is coming to save you. What they will do, and what have been done for me, when people see me, I was trying to get out that that hole I was in. Guess what? Somebody came with a rope. Somebody came with a shovel. Somebody came and let me help. Cause they see you're actually trying to move it and trying to get into a more, I don't even want to call it better, into I guess a better place, if that is right. Because I see there are days that I have are not good days still.
Always. And that's one of the misnomers, Kings, is that
Mm,
you don't ever. It, so I'm a Christian man, and God very clearly spoke to me and said, I'm your heavenly father, not your fairy
mm,
godmother. And I think every day we're responsible to get up and be involved in our recovery. So in that
yes.
sense, no one is coming to save us. The other thing is that we never get to that recovery. You can't declare yourself recovered It's always a constant and a present tense. And a recovery is something you have to continually manage.
Daily,
And
yes.
I've found that effort is rewarded with assistance. That the very first person, I love your analogy of the hole. I had a dear friend say to me once, he said, "John, you've got to stop digging. I just need you to
Yeah.
stop digging." Well, I'm trying to get out
Wow.
of this hole. The best thing you can do is just stop digging. I'm thinking, you know what?
It might
I
be
keep
I
I keep digging
right.
this bloody hole, and I've got to stop digging this hole. And stopping digging and stopping a series of bad behaviors that I was actively engaged in was the starting point. And then someone else will come along, as you said, with a rope, and then someone else will come along with a ladder, and then someone will actually offer you a hand. And then all of a sudden you find you're halfway up and someone else will pull you up. But here's the scary part. It is more comforting to us and easy to jump back in the hole than to walk 3 feet forward. We're just so, and it's easier. It's like, man, I'll go back in the hole because then at least I know what depression feels like. I know what alcoholism feels like. I know what overeating feels like. I know what hating myself feels like. But when I'm standing on top of the hole and I've got to love myself, I've got to be kind to myself, I've got to take responsibility for my actions, I don't like that so much. I'd rather be in a hole. And I think that's where we will spend years going through this journey of jumping in and out of the holes that we've dug for ourselves. And and at some point we have to start moving and progressing. Our past will either define us or refine us. And a lot of people who've been through traumatic things have allowed their past to define them, lock them in a cage instead of saying, this is going to make me into a better man. I'm going to be a better woman because of this thing and actually embrace it. They kick against it instead of saying, it's okay. This happened to me, but it doesn't make me who I am. What makes me who I am is the man that's walking forward.
And that's key to trauma shaping leadership, right? The other day I went to the gym. I go every day. People say, "How many days a week you go?" I said, "I go every day that ends in a Y." And they like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, why? Why? Because I woke up this morning. Why? Because I got to make my day count. Why? Because people depend on me. Why? And I just went down the list. Why? Shaping trauma shapes leadership. So what I tell people is like, if you wasn't 400 pounds, you can't tell me at 400 pounds how to lose 100 pounds because you never experienced. That's the way how I see it. I don't know if that's right or wrong,
It's good.
right?
It's very good.
How can somebody tell like and that's where trauma shapes leadership. So if I went through my mental health struggles, people going through their mental health struggle, and let alone mental health, we talked about addiction. Like if people went through that and they're working to get out of that situation or they're resolved from that situation, but they have to work on it daily, they could share what they've done to get out of there. And somebody might take a little bit, like maybe a portion from that and taking it and add it to their train, right? Caboose, right? They add it and they make their own training for their own journey. That's what I had to do. And I know others are doing that as well because people come up to me like, I wasn't gonna come to the gym today, but I knew you was gonna be here. And look, here you are. So it's like, so people see that as encouragement, right? Trauma shapes leadership.
Yeah, it does. It propels you forward. If you allow it to, it'll grow you. Like my
Mm.
doctorate's in theology, but I tell people it's turning shit into fertilizer. If you will allow it to, you will grow. So you can't get good fruit off a bad tree.
Mm.
And there's a parable in the Bible, and there's a fig tree growing there, and the master of the house walks along and says to the steward, "I want you to dig and dung this tree. I want you to take this tree that's not producing fruit, and I want you to scrape fertilizer around it, and as a result of that, it's going to produce fruit." The shit or the crap of your life is actually the very thing that's going to allow you to be fruitful going forward. If you will allow it to shape you and not smother you. So trauma informed leadership is being aware of what you've been through, understanding how that's shaped your perception, but also how it's shaped your mercy, how it's shaped your compassion, how it's shaped your insight into understanding what's going on in people's lives. They're the elements to leadership that are so often lacking. And when you're in situations like law enforcement and even the military, like police officers, for example, the average person, it's like 1 in 6, say, has a likelihood of 1 in 6 things of childhood adverse experiences. Police officers have 4 times as many. In my work with the military, I've found that somewhere between 20 and 80%, which is a huge variance for a lot of reasons, of our tip of the spear warfighters have had adverse childhood experiences. EMTs, probably 30% of rookies within the first 3 months are experiencing extreme symptoms of post traumatic stress within the first 90 days. So,
Right.
if we're not aware as leaders that trauma is relevant and present in our people, then shame on us. We should be aware of it. Now, that doesn't mean we make excuses, but what it does
Right.
is give us reasons. And there's a difference between excuses and reasons. I can look at someone who is using their trauma as an excuse and they're a victim. I can look at someone who's trying to overcome their trauma as a reason to give them an opportunity, a second chance, and a path forward.
Vulnerability, vulnerability, vulnerability. That's the one word that kept coming to my mind when you said that, and share the actual behind it. It's critical for leaders. Dr. John, I had to be vulnerable and share my trauma and with people like it was so long where I didn't want to do that. But I said, how can I heal or how can others see that there's a way out? You don't have to stay in that hole. Vulnerability is very critical for leaders. I think, my belief.
I
It
believe so. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, for sure.
not saying, and you said it earlier, like you don't have to share everything. They just share something that will lock in with somebody else so they could see.
There is such a thing as oversharing and appropriate sharing.
Right.
Um, and
Can you
I
get into that? What's the scoop on that? Oversharing and appropriate sharing. Like, what's the behind the scenes on that?
so you and I are sitting in this environment and we're getting to know each other and we're
Yeah.
appropriately sharing. If I meet someone at a coffee shop and I sit down beside them and says, "You know what? I was anally raped at 4 years old because I didn't tidy my
Right.
room. How are you today?" It's like, "Who the
All
hell
right.
is this
Yeah,
guy?"
like you're like, what just happened?
Yeah, like, "Dude, who is this creepy guy talking to me about that?" You know?
Right.
And I think in the workplace, it's sometimes a little difficult because as a leader
Yeah.
who's mercy and compassionately driven, there's some things that people would see are inappropriate. And I think it's just wisdom, and wisdom is just experience and time and mistakes all culminating in something that, "Oh, yeah, I won't do that again." And or this is how I would do it, is just finding ways to be able to have permission to speak to people about things that are going on. And, I think sometimes in life, we've just gotta take time and pause, and as you said, put ourselves out there, and you can do it in various ways, like, "Hey, listen, I've got some thoughts I wanna give to you just as an idea. From my own experience, this is what I've learned." And allow them to take those away and do something with it. And our vulnerability is putting something out there that might be misinterpreted. Their
Right.
vulnerability is picking something up that might be helpful. Our vulnerability is putting out something that could be helpful. Their vulnerability is picking up something that might be helpful.
In turn, like making it like a safe environment, right? On both exchanges, right? To make it to that
Yeah.
safe thing to where, okay, I'm able to share and you're able to receive, take what you need from it and use it towards your situation.
Yeah. And I think that's all a matter of just building a series of conversations and
Right.
building a culture within a workplace. At one stage, I actually applied to join the law enforcement because I love law enforcement. I love what law enforcement does. Um, I aced everything. I aced all the academic tests. I aced the physical. Here I am, like I was 58, I think, at the time, and I beat the crap out of every other 22-year-old there because I'm just older. And I beat everything academically. Why? Because I studied longer and harder than anybody else. I'm not that smart, but I
Right,
am that stubborn. And
right,
it came down to I went through everything, got in there, got in front of the LT, and they basically said, you can't do this because you've got PTSD. It's on all your websites. It's like, are you telling me you don't have people on your law enforcement with PTSD? They go, no, no one in law enforcement has PTSD. I'm thinking,
Not true.
you're lying.
Yeah, that's
You're just lying. You just don't want a
yeah,
lawsuit. You see me as a potential lawsuit. Whereas I see myself as someone who wants to come, well, you don't want to be a rookie. You wouldn't want to sit in a car. Of course I want to sit in a car. I want to keep my community safe. Seattle's burning and I don't want to be Seattle. I want to try and
right.
do something. And I think, with my experience, maybe I can help diffuse situations. Maybe I could help support staff. I'm thinking of all these reasons I should do it. They're trying to find all these excuses why I shouldn't. And that was tremendous insight for me into the problem. One of the problems we have with law enforcement is that if someone, and it's like the military, if you talk to someone in the military, I work with a lot of friends. If they come back from the sandbox with having um, extreme deployment situations within their deployment, often it's not what happened there that caused them problems. In some cases, of course, but often I found with the people I deal with, it's what happened before in their childhood that is a real, and you can't get good fruit off a bad tree. But they can't tell the VA about that because if they do, it's a pre-existing condition and they lose their benefits. Law enforcement, we've already talked about the fact they're 4 times more likely to have pre-existing condition, adverse childhood things. You can't go and tell someone to shrink inside, man, I had this happen to me as a childhood and I'm really having problem breathing with it, because you're going to get a desk job straight away. You can't really even admit, like in your situation you shared before we got on, that this thing is still affecting you because you're going to get on a desk job. You didn't sign up to get on the desk job. You didn't sign up to someone to take your badge away. You signed up to try and make a difference in your community. So even institutionally, we're not prepared to have honest conversations. And if we do, the first response we're going to have is, we're going to get a lawsuit. We need to put you in the back office.
Right.
So, well, I'm not going to tell you. I'm struggling. I'm just
Yeah.
not gonna go. I'm gonna make it up. So we have this whole emotional armor that you have to put on under your body armor before you go to work. And if we look at our law enforcement, and you've served both militarily and in law enforcement. On when you were away on deployment, you had the opportunity to come home and take off your armor, and you could at least say you're safe. Law enforcement's 24/7. And we don't give our men and women an opportunity to have some conversations around it. And I think that's really
Yeah.
sad. I think that's a disservice to people who are dedicating their life to try and help the greater good.
Yeah, and that's about the transition and identity, right? It's you can't stay like law enforcement or whatever is always a transition, right? When people lose their identity,
They do. So identity is a very big thing. And I think part of the challenges that people have with transition is they come home and, the term is they come home and the war still goes. You come off duty, or you come off your shift, and you come off, or you retire, and it keeps going on. And I don't think we transition people well. I think people don't have an opportunity to come out with a sort of support to reinstate in life. And even by the nature of law enforcement, it's very hard for law enforcement to have relationships outside of law enforcement. And you know what it's like. If you're hanging around with a whole bunch of guys you grew up in my tribe, for example, in your wherever you grew up, whatever suburb you grew up in, if that's your only group of friends you have, then that is the limit to those group of friends. You are limited by the behaviors of other people and the
right?
wisdom of other people. And if you look at law enforcement or the military, it becomes this very insular group. If you're not helped to be able to expand that journey and that experience to include the richness of other relationships, then it becomes very myopic. And that's why we see so much suicide amongst police and amongst military, because there's a whole bunch of people who don't have any answers, not giving any answers except for drugs, alcohol, or aberrant behavior. And it's like, well, there's no answers because none of my friends in my neighborhood, in my suburb, have any answers. Therefore, there's no answers. And I think that's one thing with transition we need help with.
Wow. what do you think, like, how would somebody like we talk about rebuild a lot, to rebuild their identity after a loss, like to I could just like I said, I could just talk about my journey, my life journey. I did, I before I came into the service, I was an inner city kid. I went into service and I completed my service. Now I'm back out in society, but I tried to be that person that I was prior to me going into the service, and it didn't work out so well for me. Like I right, I tried to be that person before prior to service, and I could not because I was trying to rebuild my new identity because I experienced something for a sustained long period of time and trying to erase that or I put that black mark on it like let me just black this out
Redact
and
this thing. Yeah.
yeah, redact it and let me just work on from this point moving forward when you really can't redact it because it's already inputted and
Right.
ingrained in your journal.
I think that comes back to the concept of living life from the inside out.
Mm,
And again, because you spend all this time in your youth living from the outside in, what you're actually doing is asking, who am I and what's my role in the world? And you're doing that now in your 30s or your 40s. And it's like you look around and think, well, everyone else has got their crap together. I don't. I'm the only person in the planet who doesn't know what their purpose is, which is a lie. Everybody else is just making it up as they go along. And I think it's giving yourself permission to go, okay, me and everybody else is just making some crap up. So what crap am I not going to make up? Like, what is really important to me? Okay, what is really important to me? Okay, well, what is really important? Oh, my health. Okay, let's start with our health. My spiritual life.
right,
Okay, that's important. Being a man. Okay, what's a man? Oh, now I've really got to do some thinking. And
right.
and again, you can only get that in silence. That's things you got to sit down. For me, every day it's Christ, coffee, and a cigar. I sit down and I pull my journal out and I ask myself some questions. Where am I going? What am I doing? Who do I want to be? What does life look like? And I think these are questions that everybody should answer.
Rice, coffee, and cigar,
Cigars.
and
Every
a
day. Christ,
notebook.
coffee, and cigars. Mate. Sit there with a little stogie, me and Jesus having a coffee,
Yeah.
reading my Bible, sitting with my journal, going, "How you going, God?" He's going, "Good." "How's running the universe?" "Yeah, it's good." "You need help?" "No, I don't."
Right,
"What do you need help with?" "I don't need anything." God's going, "You're telling me you
right,
don't need something." "Well, I'm lying." "Oh, so you're lying now." "Oh, well, did I just admit that?" "Yes, I did." "So let's talk about that." "Okay." "I'm
right.
scared to ask you." "Oh, what are you scared to ask me about?" "Well, I'm scared to ask you about this podcast I'm going on. I'm scared to ask you about this." "Okay, so why don't we talk about that today? Let's just do today, and tomorrow we'll start again with another coffee, and we'll do tomorrow."
Mm. So that's a heavy play in recovery, like having that, like your face, or just like you said, write it out.
Yeah.
They said, write it out, make it plain, right? Like don't come with all these extra words. Like just talk to me plain, like we having a
I'll show you
conversation.
mine. I'll show you mine. My wife bought me this for Christmas, and it's a beautiful bound little journal, and, she bought it because she thinks if you're gonna spend it, you need to have it and need to value it. So every day I
Oh
just sit
wow.
down and I just write some words. I just sit down and I just write words. Just what are my
Oh
words?
wow.
What's going on? And it doesn't have to be long. And it doesn't have to be this. If you have a look at the other books I've got, they're just exercise books you get from Walmart or Tom Thumb. Because it's
Wow.
paper's paper. And do you need a fancy pen? You don't need a fancy pen. You just need a pencil. What you
Right.
need is this is a great starting point. Get yourself a crappy exercise book and just write 3 pages. "Well, what am I gonna write for 3 pages?" "Well, why don't you write about the fact that you don't know what to write?" "Well, here I am sitting down. Dr. John King on bloody VET S.O.S. podcast told me I gotta write 3 bloody pages. So what am I gonna write?" "Well, I'm gonna do that guy was stupid, and he just talked, and he had a weird accent, and Kings was just sitting there, and they were doing that, blah, blah." "Okay, great, fantastic. First 3 pages are on Kings and me."
Yeah.
Next day, sit down and just see what happens, and just talk. And some people will call that prayer, some people will call it meditation, and it really where your heart's coming from. But that process, what that's doing is taking your internal thoughts and making them external. You're no longer confused in your head, but you're putting them down external to, I am worried about this. I'm worried about my marriage. I'm worried about my kids. And it's taking all this inner turmoil that you can't process and it's putting it out of you onto something else. You're getting rid
Wow.
of that and putting it there, and then it becomes a mechanism for reflection.
Mm,
Also, a mechanism
wow.
to track um, recovery, to track development, because I can see where I was January 1 and I can
That's
see where I'm
good.
up to March 26th. It's a way for
Wow.
me to see my progress and growth. And it'll take you 15 minutes and a cup of coffee.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I have a tracker, a step tracker on my arm, and I keep it charged up so I can see how much steps I put in a day because, people like, "Man, how did you lose so much weight? Did you take the shots?" Like, "No, it's called getting outside and walking," but
And
this
walking,
reminds me.
walking to the gym.
Right, walking to the gym, I'm not running, I'm walking up an incline on the treadmill, I'm on the elliptical, I'm doing these things that is helping me identify. Because
Yes.
before I didn't know how much steps I didn't know, but how
You're
can
just
I get
eating and getting fatter
it?
and go, "Why am I
Right.
not losing weight?"
Right. Like, okay, this I have to talk about every day I will do this amount of steps, non-negotiable. So I tell myself every day, non-negotiable, 12,500 steps every day, non-negotiable. Right now, I'm day 226 straight
Congratulations.
without
Congratulations.
missing a day of 12,500 steps or greater.
It's great. Wonderful. Well done.
226 days straight. And if I would have told myself this, Dr. John JK, that 226 days, you're going to walk over 12,500 steps. I would have probably made it past day 5. Tell you that
Yeah.
right now, like, ain't no way, ain't no way. But now looking back, like you said, is documented. Looking back at it,
Yeah.
like, man, you know how many days I didn't want to do that? You know how many days like I do it later, and then I seen the time. I'm like, man, I got to get out there and get my steps because it's almost midnight. Like, I get up and I go outside and I walk because I see that I'm short.
Yeah. I get it, man. And for me, it's the same with journals. For me, it's the same. It's the way I start a day. I get to my shed. Some days I'll write, some days I won't. Some days I'll just sit. But that's different than going to the gym. It's a different activity. Some days I will just sit and be grateful. Some days I'll put music on. Some days I might read another one of my books. But every day I try and get a better space. I started with my day with my wife, coffee, and we listen to our Bible together. First thing in the morning, we put it on our phone and we just play it. We sit around, we listen to the word, and then she'll go and she writes her pages, and I'll come to the shed and I'll have a cigar. And, and whatever it is, those rituals are very important for those of us that have been in places like you have in the service, because your whole early existence was built around rituals. You come out and there are no rituals. So you
Right.
come into a vacuum. So instead of coming out and taking all that grit and discipline and self determination and now applying it external to the service or external to the force, you just let it go. And that's why so many people do let their life go. Instead of saying, you know what, I had the privilege of spending 10 years of my life, 20 years of my life knowing the value of discipline. I'm going to bring that out now and apply that by
Wow.
myself. Because now instead of living from the outside in, I'm now living from the inside out because
Wow.
discipline is very important to me.
Wow. What's your thoughts on unaddressed trauma? How do you think that will like impact the family? I know how for me, it distanced me from some of my family members because I did not want to show weakness, right? I like, oh, I got it together, and I just kind of kept everybody at a arms, double arms, triple arms length away. You can see me from a distance.
I think, closeness requires honesty, and if you're
Right,
guarding a wound, then you're really not fully present. You may be physically there, but emotionally you're defending, you're triggered, you're numb,
right.
you're suspicious, you're ashamed. And I think that's part of what trauma teaches. Trauma teaches survival. Um, Whereas relationships really do need something different. They need honesty. They need to be present. You got to learn how to regulate and manage things that are disappointing to you.
Go ahead and manage things. And that's all about the rising. Coming out of the ashes we talked about at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, it is. And it's learning those, and there's skills to be learned. There's no
Right,
shame in not knowing something because we all started somewhere. And that's
right.
part of what we aim to do with the Phoenix Collective is give you skills that you may not have been raised with or you may not have been trained for, but these are things that we've all learnt together and we've found that these work for us.
I'll, I couldn't wait for this conversation because I had some questions out there to ask. Because I had it listed down. I was like, man, this is a great healing moment for me and others as well. And they sent some stuff to me too to ask you. One of the things you it was on the website. They you have a lot of great content out there. One of the things says you can't perform and still be in the pain.
I think
Remember,
you
I shared with you, I was a high performer
yeah,
and I was in so much internal pain. Like nobody never asked me, was I okay? Until somebody that was really close to me is like, "You're not okay. Let's go for a walk."
yeah. The thing is you can perform in pain and you know that. But
Mhm.
what you can't do is sustain the performance. At some point,
Yes.
something will crumble. Your work relationships, you'll fly off the handle. You'll be in a stressful situation and you'll overreact instead of appropriately act. And we see a
Yes.
lot of that in our law enforcement, and we hear about it in our military. And if you're carrying that, it puts you in great risk. That's why I think again, trauma informed leadership is very important.
You put the phoenix flare. So is that, you said the phoenix rise because it chooses to. Remember we talked about this earlier? It's a choice. It's a choice for you to stay in that hole. It's a choice.
It's all a choice. At some point, you got to draw a circle around yourself and say, as you said, it starts here. No one's coming to save me.
It's coming.
And we use that in as a cliche, but it's a reality. It's like I got to draw a circle around myself, and I got to do the work here now.
Yes.
Not regretting what I've come through, but looking forward. I'm doing my work today for tomorrow. I'm not doing my work because of what I went through yesterday. I'm doing my work today for tomorrow.
And that's what said that your story is still being written. And this is like, and that's why I couldn't wait to have this conversation with you, because it's like it's not over. You might come up to a semicolon, like your life is at the semicolon moment right now. Like it's a continuation. This right here is a continuation.
Yes.
What you shared with us earlier about your childhood,
Mhm.
this is a continuation. And you said, "What can I do?" Now I'm hosting these events. I'm doing these just because I know for a fact there's other males out there that's going through their journey, their trauma that's not being addressed, that they're walking around with it every day. And that's what's hurting on the inside, right? Because you know how long I wanted to say something to somebody, Dr. King? You know
Yeah,
how
I can
many
imagine, bro.
years,
Yeah.
how many days, how many hours, how many seconds? But I kept my mouth shut and I kept packing it in until I couldn't pack it in no more. And then it just
Yeah. I get it, bro. I get it.
pain can become purpose. And look where we are right now. We having a conversation. Pain
Exactly.
can become purpose.
Exactly.
Growth requires honesty. Remember, I told you I had to look
Absolutely.
in the mirror. I had to look in the mirror at myself because I said it got to start here. Where else it gonna start? This gotta be the starting point right here. I gotta look myself in the mirror. So I'm challenging if you're listening, if you're watching, I started in the mirror. We got a doctor right here that he'll share his I had a case, Scott. We had to start in the mirror. I had to look at the external self. Cause the internal self was trying to figure it out, how to navigate around this world, how to weave in and out of communication, relationships, how to do all of that. But I wasn't talking to the person that's my representative. I wasn't talking to my representative.
That's
My
good. Very good.
representative was doing all the talking, but I wasn't talking to my representative.
Yeah, that's good. Very good.
So before we wrap up, because we coming up to the top of the hour, like what are some ways that people can reach out to you and get on the Phoenix Collect? Like you talked about these events that you have monthly, quarterly. Um, man,
Yeah. So if they go to phoenixcollective.app, they can enroll and they'll get an email to free events that happen about every 6 weeks, 6 or 8 weeks.
mm.
If they wanna connect with me on the website, it's drjohnaking.com or on social media, Dr. John A. King. And, we would love to connect with them and we would love to help them and, we'd love to help them
And
get to
he
where they
actually
wanna go.
responded, y'all, because I reached out to him on LinkedIn and he responded like under an hour. He's like, yeah, sure, yeah, let's have a conversation. I'd love to come on the VET S.O.S podcast.
Well, thank you.
So I just want to thank you on behalf of everybody that's going to come across this, viewers, listeners, everybody and anybody. Look, like I said, this I know it's helping me in my healing journey. As a phoenix, we shall rise. Phoenix, we are rising, coming out of the ashes, and it's okay. And when you and Dr. K, this is why I tell myself, when you're ready, when you're ready, this is me. When you're ready, you know what? I had people that I didn't even know. They kept coming up to me, different people at different times saying along the same things. So I know I was on the right track. It took me a while to come out, but when I was ready, I was like, okay, so what? I was 400 plus pounds. And I'm not that now. So what? I was in the institution. Okay, that helped me to get to where I'm at right now. Going through it suck. I ain't gonna lie. Going through it, yeah. How many of us that's listening, that's watching, are going through something right now and we don't know where to turn or go to? One place is the Phoenix Collective.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. And remember, you do not have to drown in the sea of transition. Grab that VET S.O.S Lifeline. We're here to help. Like, subscribe, share it with somebody, pass it along. Remember, knowledge is living, is moving. Share it to somebody. You don't know if they need it. Give it to them and let them decide if they need it or not. Don't just hold it. Don't
That's
hoard
good.
it.
That's good.
Give it to them and let them take what they need from it. Don't decide on if they need it or not. You don't know because what and this one thing before we start off, Dr. K, I have not found a human being yet that tells everybody everything. I have not yet. Yeah, so you don't know what somebody needs. They'll let you know what they need, right? So you don't know. Just give it to them and let them take what they need from it.
Yes.
The thing that you holding back could be the same thing that they need to move
Yes.
forward.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful.
Thank you, everybody. Until next time, take care. Peace.